in the desert. A 404 permit is the ability to build something where it's a navigable waterway of the United States. We live in the desert. There are no navigable waterways in the desert, but you had to get a 404 permit. There are very strict environmental laws at the federal level. We do not need to add to that constantly at the state level. So Senator Nielsen said he's going to vote against this bill for very good reasons. As he articulated, we should do more to reform CEQA. I disagree. I will vote for this bill because of the exception. I will vote for this exception. I would have voted for the Pac Bell exception. I will vote for any exception that we have to CEQA until we get it right, until we get a sense of balance back of what we're trying to achieve here in creating jobs and letting people earn a living versus protecting the environment that I think we all want to do, but in a sensible, balanced way. Thank you. I urge a yes vote.
Mr. Belines.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this bill because I am absolutely in support of jobs in California. If they happen to be in Los Angeles, I will support it. If it happens to be in Fresno, I support it. If it happens to be in Chico, wherever it is in California, I want to support those jobs. Now, this isn't perfect. It's not probably the best thing to do, the best way to do it in terms of a piece of legislation. But I'll tell you what, when we're struggling with unemployment the way we are, once in a while we have to make some adjustments. I don't know who those men and women are that will get the jobs, but God bless them, they'll have a job. So many people are struggling right now. I will always rise and support the jobs. I mean, I've heard arguments on both sides of this, and they all make sense, and they all have a strong impact on what I'm thinking. But at the end of the day, wherever we can put somebody to work and let them build their lives back and put their children in school and feel safe in their community, we are doing better. And this is a good bill. I totally support the idea of jobs, and I think it's the right thing to do. I want to add a couple of comments I've heard tonight. First of all, I want to establish my qualifications for talking about football. Fresno should have a professional team. We won 51-0 in our opening game this weekend. I'm not going to talk about the fact it was Davis we beat. I think it's important to establish that. I also heard something about the Houston Texans. David Carr, Fresno State, first-round draft choice, went to Houston. Fresno State has 4 quarterbacks in the NFL. I thought I would just share those points with you. That's why I support jobs in Fresno State.
Thank you very much, Mr. Belines. Ms. Saldana.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I rise to adjourn in memory of the San Diego Chargers. As Mr. Fletcher has pointed out, if this really was an attempt to bring in a football team from any place other than a city that currently has them, then we would gladly accept the amendment that he has proposed. And so clearly the bags are being packed. The Chargers are looking for other opportunities elsewhere. I just do want to let the City of Industry know what they're getting into, though, because the care and feeding of a professional team may be beyond the budget they are anticipating. San Diegans passed a bond back in '67, $28 million. Permission to read on the floor, Madam Speaker?
Without objection.
Thank you. San Diegans passed a ballot measure Proposition 1, for $27.75 million and built the stadium with 53,000 seats. But being a very fast-growing football team, very soon they needed in 1984 an additional expansion. Why? Because they were promised a Super Bowl if they expanded. And so $9.1 million was put into the San Diego Stadium, and it was named then first San Diego Stadium, then Jack Murphy Stadium, for a sports writer who had been a promoter of the stadium. At public expense, but San Diegans loved their Chargers and they happily put money into it. However, when the NFL said, we will not come back for a Super Bowl unless you expand again, San Diegans agreed in 1997 to expand the stadium again at a cost of $78 million, which unfortunately was not sufficient, so they managed to get some money from one of our major businesses, Qualcomm, which is why when that expansion was completed, the naming rights went from Jack Murphy. They had already gone from the people of San Diego to Jack Murphy, a sports writer for one of our local newspapers, and it is now called Qualcomm Stadium. So you can kind of see the evolution of how this game is played.
2 minutes, Ms. Saldana.
And as My colleague from San Diego just reminded me, don't forget the ticket guarantee. So City of Industry, be aware of what you are getting into. The care and feeding of a professional football team is treacherous at best. But I have to say, we know it is fall. Fall is in the air. The leaves are turning. There is football on television, and Los Angeles is getting a special deal that we never saw coming until the end of session. It's a tradition around here. It's a tradition. So we really can't argue against this. Those of us in San Diego delegation, we're used to our neighbor to the north having this type of influence, having this type of sway. So again, when the time is appropriate, I will rise officially to adjourn in memory of the San Diego Chargers, and I wish the City of Industry all the best with their bouncing baby football team.
Ms. Evans.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's hard to follow the image of bouncing baby football teams, but I'll try. Members, I don't live in San Diego. I was born in San Diego. I have no stake in the Chargers. I don't live in Los Angeles. I don't live in the City of Industry. I live in the North Bay. I'm not even a football fan. Nevertheless, I could agree with almost everything that's been said here on the floor tonight, on both sides. And for me, this is the proverbial difficult choice. This is the proverbial difficult vote that I have to cast tonight, because it pits some very strong held values that I have, one against the other. But what brought me to the decision to support this bill tonight are a couple of different factors. One is that this project really will create a number of sustainable jobs in a healthy environment, and those are the kinds of jobs that I believe we need. They are sustainable jobs. And it's the first LEED certified stadium in the United States. That's not to be taken lightly. That's huge. So there are a number of competing environmental factors. But as I said, I'm not a football fan, but I am, as the budget chair in this House, a fan of the state budget. And I have to be very mindful of the revenues that this project will be bringing in, $40 million each and every year, and again, in a sustainable way and as a result of sustainable jobs. I'm also mindful that we have had $30 billion in service cuts over the last year and a half, and that we have had to turn away revenues for projects that I simply could not support. So I want to find projects that I can support that do provide revenues to our state budget, and this is one of those, and that's why I'll be supporting it tonight.
Mr. Bradford, Assemblymember Steve Bradford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I rise in support of this bill, not just based on the 18,000 jobs that it will create, not because I'm not a supporter of CEQA, because as a former recycling coordinator and a solid waste director, I'm an environmentalist at heart. I rise in support of this because of the green development of this project. I think it's one of the most innovative designs that we'll see in California, and without a doubt in the nation, as it involves reclaimed water, solar powering of over 50% of the stadium, the fact that you will use far less concrete and steel than any other stadium and any other construction project probably built in California, and it's being used, the natural topography and the landscape, by building it into the side of the mountain, that's going to require far less air conditioning and heating. So it's not only going to create jobs, it's going to create green jobs. And as a former utility employee, all the appliances that are going to be used on this project will be energy certified, energy saving appliances. So this is a win-win for the environment. So for anyone to believe that CEQA is being skirted in this way, it's just streamlining the process, and I stand in support of this bill.
Mr. Arambula.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wasn't going to speak, but the people of the Central Valley have been involved in this discussion, so I feel compelled to address this issue. I think our role ought to be to set policy for the state. And I do believe that CEQA needs to be re-examined, but I don't believe this is the right way to do it. We should have a comprehensive look at the shortcomings of CEQA. We should look at ways to expedite it in those instances where it will further economic development, and not, as in this instance, to benefit a billionaire. Do you think we would be discussing this if there wasn't a billionaire behind this? I don't think so. We're not talking about an exemption to CEQA to help the tens of thousands of farm workers that have been unemployed. If we're going to re-examine this issue, let's do it when we have time, not on the second to last day of session, where this bill mushroomed out of nowhere. I think that there are appropriate exceptions to the general rule, but I don't think this is the exception that we ought to be approving, because it sets a bad precedent that if somebody has a big enough bankroll, they can get whatever they want out of this legislature. I understand that there are jobs that will be created if this exemption is granted, but I say there is a process for dealing with CEQA issues. And the individual supporting this project, yes, with private money, God bless him, has the bankroll to hire lawyers and defend himself. And if he's saying, I won't proceed with this project unless you give me what I want, unless you create an exemption for me, then who's blackmailing who? If there are concerns that some city is using this process inappropriately, let that be addressed in the courts. And if there is a need to revise our CEQA policy to deal with these kinds of abuses, let's do it in a general fashion by setting broad policy for the state of California and not creating exemptions for those that don't need us to speak for them.
Mr. Liu?
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I rise as a principal co-author of this bill and in support of this project, and I did not come to this decision lightly. I'm in a coastal district. The environment is one of my core issues. CEQA is a core environmental statute. But no one has really talked about the merits of the environmental parts of this project. No one has argued that this is an environmentally bad project, because it's not. In fact, it's the opposite. It's the nation's first green LEED certified stadium. Environmentalists should be proud that California is going to have the first green LEED stadium in the nation. But more importantly, I think if you really want to preserve CEQA, if you really want to preserve CEQA in the form it is in, then you better pass this bill tonight, because when the public sees us ignoring a 12.5% unemployment rate, ignoring a recession, and losing 18,000 jobs simply to follow a CEQA process, they're going to be demanding reform. And the way we stop that is to say we're going to step in and stop absurd results. This is going to be an absurd result if we allow this CEQA process to go forward and we lose 18,000 jobs at a time when we have a 12.5% unemployment rate. And so for those folks who want to preserve CEQA the way it is, we have to have these safety valves. And that's what the legislature is here for. We are here, we don't actually, as a judge, we don't apply the law as it is written. We write the laws, and we write exceptions to laws, and we take into consideration changed circumstances, such as people losing their jobs, such as this recession. And you know what? All of us this year, and I've talked to my Democratic colleagues, all of us this year were forced to be conservatives because we cut program after program after program because this state had no revenue because people didn't have jobs. We get money to spend because people do well, because companies do well. You cannot be an environmental progressive if we had no revenue. You cannot be progressive at all when the state has no revenue. And if you want to enact progressive programs, then you better get the economy going. You better jumpstart the economy. That's what this project does. It creates 18,000 jobs. And if we really want to be in touch with what the public really believes. If we really want to help those folks who don't have jobs, then we should vote yes on this bill. And most of the time, it is a false choice between the environment and jobs. But today, it is not a false choice. It is an actual choice. You vote no on this bill, this stadium proposal goes down the drain, and we lose these 18,000 jobs. It is an actual choice you are making today. Respectfully request an aye vote.
Mr. Solorio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I rise in support of this bill. 2 quick points. First of all, this is a project that has went through environmental review. There's going to be plenty of environmental mitigation, and in fact, as was mentioned, this is going to be a groundbreaking green facility. Second, I would tell you that folks across the street and in here like to talk about job killer bills. This is a job creator bill, and we need it for our economy. Our voters are hungry for us to create jobs rather than hinder jobs. This bill does that. I want to commend the author for his leadership in finding a job creator bill that creates 18,000 jobs. We need more bills like this. I rise in support. Thank you.
Ms. Galgiani.
We've heard from people that want to reform CEQA, and we've heard from people who want to protect it. And I think that we can do both. I think we can strike a balance and protect it and reform it at the same time. And to the extent that we can find projects in the state where we are able to exempt them from CEQA and stimulate the economy at the same time, we should do so. And this legislature has passed measures in the past to exempt certain things from CEQA. We did so just a few months ago when my bill to exempt grade separations along the high-speed rail corridor passed this body. And we did so back in 2004 after the levee break in my district, where we had a 1,000-foot levee break and we had flooding that threatened the drinking water for 23 million Californians in the state. We found a way to make some exemptions at that time for levees because we were in a crisis. And I think that the lack of jobs that we have now in this economy also rises to the level of a crisis. And we need to think about that when we cast our vote today. I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I just want to kind of weigh in on this since this happens to be my district. Okay, and I first want to say I wish we weren't here today. I wish there was a way to facilitate a deal between all parties where we could walk around, because this is good for the region, and this should be worked out. But as many opponents for CEQA and many opponents against CEQA, or the current CEQA, has said, CEQA is kind of immovable object sometimes to get things done quickly. A lot of times, like we're dealing with this in the House, things take a long time to get done quickly. And there should be reform in CEQA, because these projects that are good for the area should not be held up, but for the mitigation that needs to take place. I have been working on this far longer than I've been up here, because I was a mayor to a neighboring city to this before I came up here. So I've been in the loop for this for a long time. I know the parties. I respect immensely the citizens of Walnut who have objections to this. But there always have to be something that works out. And at this point, I feel I need to be weighed in at this, because that deal has not been worked out over a period of time. I want to review a little bit. In 2004, over 4.8 million square feet of warehouses was approved through the entire CEQA process with no objections to it, no lawsuits. It was already approved back in 2004. In the middle of building this is not the extra part of the warehouses, the opportunity to get an NFL team back to Los Angeles came up, and they redesigned this. Now, you got to remember, this is a traffic flow of roughly 68,000 cars for the original project, Monday through Friday, at the busiest times in traffic, in our commuter time. This new project that substituted in for the first one is much smaller. It's 2.9 million square feet of development, and it has less traffic, 54,000 car trips. And it's on Sunday, when we don't have the commute, Monday through Fridays. So I don't want to sit there and argue too much about the environmentals, because this is stuff that we worked out. All the other cities in the area have come to some conclusion with the CEQA process. Okay? So when the new proposal went through back in 2008, In 2009, a new CEQA was done. It was certified. The EIR has been certified by the City of Industry, which this locates in, and the rest of the cities around had their opportunity to submit their plans, the county, the cities, and say these are the objections we've had. All of them have been accounted for except for one of my cities. Again, I'm very proud to represent that city, and I'm torn because I want to represent everybody, but this process has failed.
2 minutes, Mr. Hegman.
Thank you. This is no redevelopment dollars. No public dollars. This is all Mr. Rossi's money in this deal. And people ask, why can't it be a California team? Well, you don't build a $2 billion project or invest $2 billion in an entity unless you have some outcome for the future. You can't just plan 5 years or 10 years on this type of development and this kind of investment. You want to look out 30 or 40 years in advance. In 20 years, 30 years, who knows what the team may be in competition. The NFL has to release the team, and the NFL owner has to sell it before any team comes here. It has to work out good for the NFL. It's not one team versus one team. This is a pooled pot of money that they split upon the team members. So this has to be in agreement with all the owners to make this thing happen. One owner can do it. I've known this developer for quite a while. It's been in business since 1947. Has never asked for any kind of CEQA waivers ever. It's the largest private developer in California. This is the first time it came up. It came up because more and more of our processes are taking longer, and sometimes you have to strike when the iron's hot. This team is, a particular development is ready to go right now. They've been through the environmentals. They're going to take care of the cities. Even the city in question, they're going to take care of with all the mitigation. But right now, we need to give them the assurance to make this deal so this NFL team comes. I urge your aye vote.
Seeing no more debate, Mr. Hall, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just to clear up a fact that the developer of this site did not just show up at midnight. They're engaged in discussions in February, but refused to allow this item to be taken up during a time when the budget was being dealt with. And so I just wanted to be clear about that. I am a supporter of CEQA. I am a supporter of CEQA, and I defend and protect CEQA. But we are required to do extraordinary things at extraordinary times. Sometimes when you've got 18,000 folk who need jobs and 18,000 people begging for food that are walking around with empty wallets, and the state of California is laying off people, and every job and every company in the state of California has to furlough or has to lay off or even close down. When people in your very own districts are sending you resumes and asking you to help find them jobs, and you say you'll do everything that you can to possibly do that, but then right now you have an opportunity to bring $800 million a year to a region and to provide 18,000 jobs, and you tell me that you cannot do it because of a city desiring to abuse CEQA and not use it for the intent that it was designed to? That's ridiculous. So if you want to vote not to put food on the table of 18,000 families, when you call yourself trying to create jobs,
2 minutes, Mr. Hall.
Shame on you. This is not about a billionaire. I don't care if it was a billionaire or trillionaire. If he has 18,000 jobs to give a community that is dying, a state that is dying and falling off the cliff, so be it. If you got a millionaire in your community that has the same type of job, so be it. But we have to do extraordinary things in extraordinary times. And sometimes you just got to make a tough decision. And this is a decision that will pump $40 million into the state of California's general fund, put $800 million into the region.
1 minute.
And create 18,000 jobs for families. And let me tell you this. I will be the first to say that I supported feeding hungry families in the state of California. I urge your aye vote. Thank you.
Clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 55, noes 15. Measure passes. Members, let me call your attention to the back of the chambers. We are joined by former Assemblymember Rebecca Cohn, former Assistant Majority Leader, Members, we are recessing the third extraordinary session and returning to the regular session. And I'm going to go to file item. Wait. Okay, I'm going to file item 207. Ms. Saldana, clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 436 by Assemblymember Saldana and others, an act relating to elections.
You may open, Ms. Saldana.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, AB 436, this is for concurrence. It will adjust the fee that is paid for ballot measures when they're submitted to the Attorney General's office. The original fee was $200. It was established over 60 years ago. This will increase the fee to cover the cost, the real actual cost of the work the Attorney General's office is doing. It was amended in the Senate for some chaptering out issues. We will also ensure that if a ballot measure does not qualify, that the funding or that the filing fee will be reimbursed. So I request your aye vote on Senate concurrence.
Mr. Berryhill, where are you?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I rise in opposition of AB 436. I believe it is not about addressing cost disparities, but actually about this House doing everything in its power to make it more difficult to place initiatives on the ballot. Now, I get it. There are those in this House who want to make it extremely difficult for taxpayers to go around this legislature and to place initiatives for the people to judge. Passing this legislation will do very little to improve the initiative process. And at the end of the day, with a House that has such poor ratings like ourselves, with such critical business to take care of like water and so forth, at the end of the day, I think the people would be pretty disgusted to see us usurp their power to go around it. I urge a no vote.
Thank you. All debate having ceased, Ms. Saldana, you may close.
Members, this is not about discouraging participation. It is simply having the cost be paid for by the people who are participating in the process. We have not increased this cost for 60 years. It's very reasonable. I ask for your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 44, noes 27. Measure is concurred. Members, we can now go to file item 210. Mr. Fuhr, clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 590 by Assemblymember Fuhr and others, an act relating to the practice of law.
You may open.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. This bill is back on concurrence after receiving a bipartisan vote in the Senate. It has no opposition, at least 36 supporters, and Senate amendments narrow the bill by sunsetting the bill. And also, I would note for all our colleagues here, it actually eventually reduces existing court fees in the process. I urge an aye vote.
Seeing no debate, clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 47, noes 21. Measure is concurred. We're moving now to file item 208. Mr. Blumenfield, clerk will read. Oh, are you ready, Mr. Blumenfield? Okay. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 474 by Assemblymember Blumenfield and others, an act relating to contractual assessments.
You may open.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is a bill. It's supported by the Sierra Club, by the Chamber of Commerce. It deals with water conservation and voluntary contractual assessments, an expansion of something that was passed here last year with regard to energy, and it applies to water conservation. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no debate, clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 55, noes 12. The Senate amendments are concurred. Members, we're now moving to file item 214. Mr. Turlington, are you ready? Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 836 by Assemblymember Torlakson, an act relating to education technology.
You may open.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is back from the Senate. The Education Technology Task Force will help set a national state standard for the national use of technology in education. The Senate amendments took out one part of the work plan. I urge an aye vote. This is fully funded by private donations, no taxpayer cost.
Seeing no debate, clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 49, noes 20. Senate amendments are concurred with. We can now move to file item 217. Ms. Carter, clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1116 by Assemblymember Carter, an act relating to cosmetic surgery.
Ms. Carter, you may open.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. The amendments in the Senate for AB 1116 were technical in nature. The amendment stated that 30 days prior to elective cosmetic surgery procedure, that there must be a physical examination that takes place. This measure has received strong bipartisan support as it moved through the legislative process, and I ask for your aye vote on concurrence in Senate amendments.
Seeing no debate, clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 73, no 0. Amendments are concurred in. $218 is passed and retained. Mr. Hall, for what reason do you rise?
Yes, Madam Speaker, I'm asking for immediate transmittal of AB 81, third extraordinary, to the Senate.
Without objection.
Thank you.
We're now moving to file item 219. Mr. Fuhrer, clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1227 by Assemblymember Fuhrer, an act relating to workers' compensation.
Mr. Fuhrer.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. This bill brings our labor code up to date by providing workers' compensation parity for job-related injuries related to peace officers and firefighters in California. The Senate amendments remove an array of other workers, park rangers, community college police officers, and others from the bill. It's unfair to ask a peace officer to have to negotiate in order to obtain basic equal treatment in our workers' compensation laws, and I urge an aye vote.
Mr. Garrick.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I have to rise in opposition as our state has faced multi-billion-dollar budget deficits, and we've struggled, and we've dealing locally with local governments trying to deal with the budget cuts. This is the worst time to add more public employee categories that would be eligible to receive the expensive leave of absence worker compensation benefits, and I urge a no vote.
Mr. Fuhrer, you may close. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Leo. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise also in opposition. I understand Mr. Fuhr's point that, in his opinion, it's unfair to have to negotiate such benefits. But if we are going to begin deciding at this level what are fair benefits for local governments to provide to workers at the local level that are otherwise under collective bargaining agreements, then we're going to have lots of very long debates in this House about those issues. I'm sure there are other things that many people in here would agree ought to be provided to workers in their view of the world. That is not our place. That is the place of local governments, and it is the place of collective bargaining, the collective bargaining process to work these issues out. This is an issue of mandating practices on local governments. That was the message that the governor had in vetoing a similar bill, and we ought not to go there. That would be an endless consideration of debates here. I urge a no vote.
Mr. Fuhr, you may close.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. This is a bipartisan bill. It's enjoyed bipartisan support in both houses. The Senate amendments significantly narrowed the scope of workers affected by the bill. And as I close, I do want to underscore this is designed to correct an inequity in law. You have, at the moment, the possibility that at a particular incident where public safety is involved, police incident, firefighter incident, you'll have officers working, firefighters working side by side, with some of them enjoying basic workers' compensation benefits that others do not enjoy. That inequity can be addressed by this narrowly tailored bipartisan legislation. I urge an aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 47, noes 20. The Senate amendments are concurred in. We're now moving to file item 220. Assemblymember Ruskin, clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1242 by Assemblymember Ruskin, an act relating to water.
You may open, Mr. Ruskin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As chair of the Budget Subcommittee on Resources last year, I held hearings on the condition of water throughout the state, and as all members of the committee were, I was shocked to discover there were so many places in our state in which people who paid for drinking water got poisonous, toxic drinking water when they turned on the tap. This is an unacceptable situation. So I've introduced this bill, 1242, which would establish that every person in California, when they pay for water, has a right, when they turn on the tap, to clean, affordable, accessible water for human consumption, cooking, and sanitary purposes. Water that is adequate for the health and well-being of the individual and the family. It is absolutely outrageous that people should pay for water, turn on the tap, and endanger their family's health by using that water. This bill would require relevant state agencies to employ reasonable means to implement this policy. I took amendments in the Senate which stipulate, and this is very important, the amendments in the Senate stipulate that the state is not liable for developing water infrastructure in pursuit of these goals. They also clarify that it only applies to water for human consumption, cooking, and sanitary purposes. The Senate Appropriation Committee said that the cost was negligible because, in fact, the bill calls for state agencies, applicable state agencies, to take reasonable means to improve the situation prospectively, and that means that this can be absorbed in the normal course of their budgetary of their budgets as they move forward. This bill will move California forward without undue fiscal impact to a day when everyone who pays for water in this state can turn on the tap and know that they are not endangering the health of their family when they use the water. I ask for an aye vote.
Ms. Fuller.
Madam President, I rise in opposition to AB 1242. I agree with the well-intended bill that concept of having safe and affordable drinking water for Californians. But this bill is not the way to do it. We absolutely have to provide more water to California, clean water that helps us, a comprehensive water bill or some other way to do this. When you add something that is ambiguous, such as affordable, what is affordable water? You are setting yourself up for lawsuits and other types of mitigation. By saying that state law, that it is the policy of the state that all residents have the right to clean, affordable, and accessible drinking water, we are adding to the bureaucracy of the state without providing an additional drop of water or a means to actually deliver. We need to take this bill and we need to change some of the language or add the definition so that we know what affordable is and that we have a way and a means to implement it. Otherwise, we are just setting ourselves up for future litigation and costly means that will not help the customers, will not help anyone that we are trying to help.
Mr. Anderson.
Question of the author.
Without objection.
I was, as I was listening to your presentation, I couldn't help but wonder, are there water providers out there who are knowingly providing unclean water?
I'm sorry?
Are there water providers out there who are knowingly providing unclean water?
I believe there are.
And do any of those water providers have any exemption from legal recourse? I mean, if I'm poisoned, of course, I'm going to sue them.
Who would make the suit? I'm sorry.
I'm saying if they knowingly are providing dirty or unclean water, the recipients of that, do they have legal recourse to sue them?
Well, they have the technical legal recourse, but they don't have the means, I believe, because the water districts are all so impoverished they can barely provide the water that they are providing, and the people who are affected by this throughout the state are largely in disadvantaged communities and individually would never have the means to take legal action in court.
So, in your bill, how does it provide for them to provide? I mean, most water districts, your ratepayers pay for all the infrastructure. So if the ratepayers can't afford to do it, how does your bill provide that they actually accomplish the goal?
Well, understanding the fiscal situation the state is in, I was sensitive to that. This provides an incremental approach to the situation. It instructs the applicable state agencies to revise, adopt, or establish policy. I'm reading from the bill. Permission to read?
Yes, but we're not going to have a dialogue here, so answer his question, and then you can close. I mean, you can.
All right. The agencies shall revise, adopt, or establish policies, regulations, and grant criteria to further the state policy. And so it's an incremental approach that recognizes the situation, provides some remedy as in the future, and that is why the Appropriations Committee felt the bill was practical enough in terms of cost that they let it out.
Thank you. I have districts like this. I have water districts like this in my district. My concern is, as we move forward with this bill and other approaches, that the eventual outcome is that the people's homes will be condemned, that the district will be condemned, and then once the way it's set up in my area is if you can't show that you can provide clean water, then in many instances the homes have to be condemned. They can't habitate those. So as a result, we're going to be creating homeless, and I'm not prepared to go there. I think that we have to look at other approaches. So at this time, I urge a no vote.
Mr. John Perez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support this measure. I think this is really one of the most significant things that we can do. As we're closing out this legislative session, we're having significant conversations about water infrastructure in the state of California. We're talking about how we could provide for water for the economic viability of our state. And quite frankly, providing clean and accessible water for the residents of our state has to be one of our top priorities. Many of you have seen examples of the water in the city of Maywood in my district, water that looks more like iced tea than water in many cases, and many of you have supported the efforts for us to try to clean that up. What this legislation does is support that notion that we all deserve access to clean water. With respect to some of the statements that have been made in opposition of this bill, especially with respect to statements concerning state obligations, I would draw your attention to the fact that the amendments that this bill went through in the Senate state that the provisions do not expand the state's obligation to provide water or water infrastructure beyond the obligation that may exist reasonably. So this doesn't create a new obligation for the state. Mr. Ruskin took amendments to that effect in the Senate, but it puts us on record supporting the notion of a right to clean and healthful water for all the people in the state of California. And quite frankly, I can't think of a more important issue for us to be addressing right now. I ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Jones.
Madam Speaker, members, I wish all of you could have attended the hearing chaired by Chairman Ruskin of the Natural Resources Budget Subcommittee a year ago, at which he asked all of the state agencies with responsibility for water to come in and show us a map of all of the communities in California in which there is not drinkable water. It was a horrible map. There were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of communities displayed on that map that don't have drinkable water. This is a very sensible measure. I'd ask you to look at the bill. We used to have a colleague a couple of years ago who encouraged members to actually read the bill. If you read the bill, what the bill simply does is declare that it's the state's policy to make sure that we have drinkable water. It's directed at our state agencies so that they work in concert towards that end. It has specific language in it that says that this does not impinge on the right of other public water agencies. So the suggestion that somehow this is going to lead to the condemnations of home and homelessness just baffles me. There's nothing in this bill that directly infringes on existing water agencies' rights. But it does send a clear direction to the state that this needs to be a predominant value, and moreover, I don't believe it's the chair's goal that this substitutes for any of the discussions or bills that we may shortly take up that deal with water infrastructure. It's just putting us on record declaring that we ought to make sure we have drinkable water. And with that, I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Arambula.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I, too, rise in support of this bill, and I wish to thank the author for his hard work during the hearings and in the preparation of this bill. I believe what this bill does is it clarifies existing state policy regarding the right of humans to have not only clean water but also affordable water. It allows for the establishment of criteria that can be helpful in allowing these distressed communities to access whatever available resources there might be, federal or state or bond monies, so that they can, to the extent practical, have access to clean and affordable water. And on behalf of many of those communities that Assemblymember Jones referred to that are in my district and that are in my predecessor's district, whose motto was read the bill, we wish to thank the author and urge an aye vote.
Mr. Ruskin, you may close.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Nielsen, I didn't see your mic.
Madam Speaker,
Assemblyman is a very tall man there, and I'm a little shorter, so it's easy to not be seen. I'm going to entreat you to vote no on the bill, but I would commend the author because I think that he's on the right track. I would suggest some amendments that would get me enthusiastically as a joint author, and that is that, yes, humans do have a right to water. Agricultural, domestic, industrial, business use of water. And policies of this state have been precluding that, and we're in throes of a water debate that may fail and not allow us to have that. I have high hopes that maybe we can come up with something that will provide clean, useful water for human beings, for agriculture, business, and industry. This doesn't quite get there, but maybe there's a beginning.
Mr. Huffman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, when your only tool is a hammer, they say everything looks like a nail. And it seems that we cannot have a discussion about good water policy and good water management or even a human right to clean drinking water without the old canards coming back. Gotta pursue our Republican water agenda, or you can't do any of that. Let's stop holding disadvantaged communities hostage to the ideology that you may bring to the issue of water. Assemblymember Ruskin is presenting us with a simple bill. It recognizes that the water all of us take for granted, the water we have been drinking today, the water we showered with or bathed with today, the water we wash with, we take for granted that that water is clean and healthful. And yet right now, in the state of California, you have situations where irrigators are using high-quality, pristine Sierra snowmelt right next to communities who are drinking arsenic-laden, polluted groundwater. This isn't a question of needing to build a dam or do something else in order to address that injustice. This is a question of whether we have the resolve to set a course in state policy to care about these people. There's ways to exchange that water. There's ways to clean up that groundwater. We can help these people if we just show some resolve, if we show some commitment. Now, the only real legal effect of this bill, quite frankly, is that it says we care. If you read the bill, it says from now on, as a policy of the state of California, we're going to care when we see communities that drink contaminated, nitrate-laden, arsenic-laden drinking water right next to an irrigation canal with pure Sierra snowmelt. And we're going to try to find ways, without taking away anybody's water rights, we're going to try to find ways for win-win solutions to make it work. It's a simple bill, folks, and yet obviously Assemblymember Ruskin has had to fight very hard just to get to this point. Hopefully we will see a lot of green lights go up to make this simple but very important statement for the policy of the state of California.
Mr. DeVore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I was listening intently to the previous speaker, my colleague from Marin County, and listening to an argument about holding certain communities hostage. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to talk about holding communities hostage, certainly you would then look at some communities in the north end of the Central Valley, just a little south of actually the San Francisco Bay Area, where unemployment is now in excess of 40% because of an utter failure of this body to make more water available through a variety of means. I also listened intently to the previous speaker's remarks about individuals that have water rights because of precedent, because of when they acquired their property, using that water that they own for irrigation, while other communities suffer. Ladies and gentlemen, if you act to remove someone's law, the rights that they have to that water, the law of the river, as I think it's called, then what you're doing is you're engaging in a taking. What I would suggest to you is that rather than trying to parse a diminishing amount of water in a growing state, that the best thing to do would be to make more of the substance available through adequate provisions for conveyance and storage so that the communities in the coastal range and the Central Valley don't have to rely on groundwater, which 90% of them do. And that's what we're really talking about here, is problems that arise when local water districts have to rely on groundwater that has been, over the years, contaminated through industrial or agricultural use or even natural groundwater contamination. For example, there's an aquifer in my district that has a naturally high level of arsenic in it. It wasn't put there by man, it's just naturally occurring. Now, if you had adequate means to store and to convey the water from the enormous amount that runs off from the Sierra Nevada, then you wouldn't have to rely on the groundwater. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I would submit to this body that the reason why we're even having this discussion is because of the breakdown in what was, until just a few days ago, fruitful negotiations to finally break through and have a true water solution for the people of the state of California. This bill is not it. This bill does, in fact, incur major state costs, because if it simply expresses our intent that everyone should have good water and isn't backed up by anything, that's clearly not what's in this bill. I would urge a no vote.
Seeing no further debate, Mr. Ruskin, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for all the debate and supportive comments. Let me say that in answer to a couple of specific objections to the topic of affordability, affordability is basically, in terms of this issue, a term of art that is expressed in the federal regulations of the federal EPA, and it is a very practical term when applied. So it is not something extreme. But in terms of affordability, it should be understood that people who pay for water and who turn on the tap and get toxic water have to pay for other water because they can't use the toxic water. They have to pay for bottled water. That's certainly not a proper level of affordability. In summation, let me say that this is really a bill about values and fairness. We have, all of us in this room are able to turn on the tap when we pay for water and get water that is drinkable and doesn't harm ourselves or our family. Over the years, many people have gotten potable water, but a certain segment of the population has not.
2 minutes, Mr. Ruskin.
Thank you. There is nothing to say that we could expand the supply of water and that everyone would be treated equitably. There has been a history of discrimination in regard to this. This bill addresses that. It addresses the value of fairness. I ask for an aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 47, noes 24. The Senate amendments are concurred in. Members, we're now going to go to motions and resolutions. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to go to file number 100. Senate bill. Clerk will read. What did you say? Mr. Jones, for what reason do you rise?
I rise to present item 224, Madam Speaker.
File item 224. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1535 by Assemblymember Jones, an act relating to hearing aids.
You may open.
Madam Speaker, members, this bill enjoyed bipartisan support, has no opposition. It consolidates two boards, the Audiology Board and the Hearing Dispenser Board. It also makes it easier for consumers to procure hearing aid devices by allowing audiologists to dispense them. The Senate amendments were technical in nature, although they did include the board consolidation. Again, no opposition, bipartisan support. I ask for your aye vote.
There's support on both sides. Members, clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 59. Senate amendments are concurred in. Ayes 59, no 6. Senate amendments are concurred in. Mr. Jones, hold on. Ms. Salas? We're moving to file item 221, Ms. Salas. We'll come back to you in a minute, Mr. Jones. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1330 by Assemblymember Salas, an act relating to veterans.
Ms. Salas, you may open. These are Senate amendments.
Yes.
We're concurring in.
Yes. Madam Speaker and members, AB 1330 is back from concurrence after passing the Senate unanimously. We passed it unanimously here. It has had no votes. I urge your support.
Clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 72, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. We're moving to file item 222, Ms. Ma. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1401 by Assemblymember Ma, an act relating to organic foods.
Ms. Ma, you may open.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. AB 1401 establishes the Transition to Organics Fund to assist farmers with the cost of transitioning from an uncertified farm to an organic farm. The fund will be privately funded and not have any general fund costs. Senate amendments place the fund under the state treasurer and provide the Department of Finance with the authority to transfer money to the California Department of Food and Agriculture to administer and distribute the fund's money. This bill has received bipartisan support in both houses. Respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Clerk will open. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 55, noes 12. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 100. Clerk will read.
Whatever you want to do.
Senate Bill 538 by the Senate Committee on Public Employment and Retirements, an act relating to county employees' retirement.
Mr. Hernandez, you may open.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is a Senate PERS Committee Bill, SB 538. It simply makes technical clarifying changes in the government code to enable the LA County Employees Retirement Association to receive the necessary physical certification of a safety member upon returning from a disability leave before making determinations as to whether the member is subject to mandatory retirement. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 72, no 0. We're now moving to file item 225. Mr. Jones. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 540 by the Assembly Committee on Health, an act relating to health.
Mr. Jones, you may open.
Madam Speaker, members, this is the annual Health Omnibus Cleanup Bill. The amendments in the Senate were technical and clarifying in nature. The bill has enjoyed unanimous bipartisan support in each House. No opposition. I ask for your aye vote.
The clerk will open the roll. Seeing no debate. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 74, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. We're now moving to our final item of the evening, members. File item 226 by Mr. Jones. Oh, clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1544 by Assemblymember Jones, an act relating to health facilities.
Mr. Jones and company may open.
Madam Speaker, members, I and my three friends here wish to present AB 1544. This is a very important bill that makes it easier for hospitals to get approval to provide clinic services on site. And all of you know we've been working very, very hard to reduce the impact on our emergency rooms to get more people into primary care. The bill has received unanimous votes throughout the process. I and my friends ask for your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All those vote for the team who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 77, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. Ms. Saldana? I'm moving the motions and resolutions. Mr. Tirico.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Hereby request unanimous consent to allow Assemblymember Lowenthal to adjourn in memory of an individual today.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, at the request of the authors, please place the following file items on the inactive file. File item number 39, AB 1369, file item 81, AB 535, file item 98, SB 70, file item 99, SB 71, file item 101, SB 76, file item 102, SB 77, file item 103, SB 78, file item 104, SB 79. All of those bills to the inactive file.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, at the request of the author, I request reconsideration on file item 66, SB 250, by Senator Flores.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I request unanimous consent to send the bill to the inactive file.
Without objection, clerk will note.
Madam Speaker, I request unanimous consent to take up all bills reported out of committee with amendments without reference to file today for the purpose of adopting committee amendments and to order the bills returned to the second reading file.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, at the request of the author, I request unanimous consent to rescind the action whereby SB 193 was passed to the Senate on September 1st and return the bill to the third reading on the Assembly file.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, at the request of the author, I request reconsideration of file item number 65, SB 550.
Without objection, reconsideration is granted.
Madam Speaker, I request unanimous consent to send the bill to the inactive file.
Without objection. Please continue.
Madam Speaker, I request unanimous consent to waive the file notice requirements to allow the Natural Resources Committee to meet and to hear SB 402 tomorrow upon call of the chair.
Without objection. Mr. Monning, for what purpose?
Madam Chair, an announcement, please, for freshman members.
Without objection?
Yes, all freshman members. There will be a photo right after the adjourn in memory and adjournment at the front of the chamber. And for freshman members of the Democratic caucus, the dinner meeting is still on, 8 p.m. Thank you, ma'am.
Members, we are almost completed in our business on the file tonight. We do have a few other items to take care of. In addition, Ms. Lowenthal has requested, could we have everyone's attention, please? Ms. Lowenthal has requested to adjourn in memory. Before we get to that point, we need to take up the day's second reading. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 131 with amendments, 819 with amendments, 337, and Senate Bill 499.
All bills will be deemed read. Amendments deemed adopted. Mr. Calderon, you have a bill on call. It would be just fine to lift the call right now. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. Members, there is a call being lifted. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 43, noes 29. The Assembly concurs in Senate amendments. Members, there will be a Republican caucus upon adjournment. We are almost there. Again, I'd like to direct your attention, please. We have one request to adjourn in memory. If we could please have quiet on the floor and members could return to their desks. Ms. Lowenthal has requested to do an adjourn in memory. Ms. Lowenthal.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. This is a continuation of the sad news that we heard last night from Mr. Perez about Frank Vicencia, a man who served in this House. Frank is something of a local legend in Long Beach. To say he's admired is an understatement. He was born during the Great Depression in Artesia in 1931. As a young man, he went to Korea. He served as a military policeman. He was a corporal. When he came home, he worked for the post office and then started a dairy supply business. He became the general manager of the California Milk Producers Council. He apparently was good at that, so he began representing a number of other interests here. And before too long, this man, a former corporal from the Korean War, became a member of the State Assembly. He was reelected 5 times, and his colleagues unanimously elected him Speaker Pro Tem. And in addition to all that, he fathered a son who I'm very proud to call a friend, a son who, like my son, is a Superior Court judge. In fact, his son, Michael Vicencia, is president of the California Judges Association. So Frank Vicencia left a wonderful legacy on a number of levels, and he is certainly deserving of our reflection, our respect, and our gratitude. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Mr. Calderon.
Yes, Madam Speaker, in memories, I rise to remember my friend. It was difficult to hear of his passing, and it's hard to imagine that I won't see his face, we won't have his smiling personality, his ability to calm any situation, and his ability to make you feel no matter what happens, it isn't all that bad. Frankie is an institution up here. And when I first came up here to the legislature, he was somebody who was a role model for me. He was a legislator's legislator. He was a gentleman. He is the one that taught most of us that we could disagree without being disagreeable. And no matter the tense situation, he would always come in there with a joke and make you laugh. In fact, sometimes when I look up at the dais, I see him, or imagine I see him, because he was up there for such a long time, and he used to run this house. And he'd always be there to have usually a party or make a joke. You know, Senator Mello was in the Senate. Portuguese hated to be called Portuguese, and Vicencia, who was Portuguese, would always call him Portuguese. And he'd always make fun of himself at his own expense. I remember one time when he was residing, I had just come in from a long night. It was not uncommon for us in those days during this week when we're on the floor all day to adjourn that night and do a road trip up to Tahoe, partake in the local parlance and games, and then come back here in the morning to start session again. I realized I was young. I couldn't do that now even if I wanted. But it was not uncommon. But this particular time, I mean, I was like exhausted and tired, and I used to sit back there where John Perez sits, and I wore my Ray-Bans back then as I do now, and I wore them on the floor. I wore them on the floor because I really hated these lights when they put them in, because it made it really bright, not to mention hot here. And I just was in no mood for anything, so I was sitting back there minding my own business, but I had my glasses on. My hair was slicked back, what little hair I had. And Frank was running the floor, and he stopped, and he said, members, pay attention. I want to recognize someone here that is probably one of the most famous movie stars ever to come out of Hollywood. He is a distinguished artist. We're honored by his presence, and I would like all of you to stand and to recognize Jack Nicholson. And I was asleep. And everybody was sitting there and clapping while then I woke up and regained my composure and then took my glasses off. But I mean, these were the kinds of things he would do. He would manage the floor. He would keep the tension down. And he was such a part of this institution, having lobbied up here and also having been a member that he could advise everybody on how to handle the daily stresses of being a legislator. But the one thing, more than anything else, he used to tell me is to always respect the institution. Respect this institution. He says, take care of it. It's important. Not only for us here, but it's important for people in California, important for us to do our job. They don't make legislators like him anymore. It doesn't matter. I'm not talking about term limits, whether there was term limits or not. They just don't make legislators like him anymore. He had a sense of history. He had a sense of style. He was just, you always felt good when you were around Frank Vicencia. And I truly am going to miss him.
Thank you, Ms. Lowenthal. Thank you, Mr. Calderon. Any remaining requests to adjourn in memory will be printed in the journal. Is there any further business to come before this House? Actually, before I get to that point, let me announce tomorrow's floor session will begin at 9:30, and at 9 a.m., the Bay Area Council, or Bay Area Caucus, is meeting in the Rules Committee room. 9 a.m., Bay Area Caucus will meet at Rules, 9:30 floor session. We return to motions and resolutions. Mr. Krikorian.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On behalf of the author, I request unanimous consent to rescind the action whereby SB 32 by Senator Negrete McLeod was re-referred to the Utilities and Commerce Committee and return the bill to third reading.
Without objection. Now, is there any further business to come before this House? Seeing and hearing none, a motion to adjourn is in order. Mr. Krikorian moves. Mr. Davis seconds that this House stand adjourned. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Quorum call is lifted. We are adjourned. We will continue all motions. Republican caucus upon adjournment. We are adjourned.